Hello, everyone. Especially to you in the front row. How lovely to see you. Have you come here especially? Fabulous. Where are you all from? Oh, very good. We've held it over a bit because it's a bit of a trip getting from the front, as you probably gather, coming in. So we just delayed by 5 minutes to let all the bodies wander over here, so they're probably all arriving. There we go. They're fine. Be okay. Right. Right, we may as well start. Right, let me introduce people. Now, these are two creatives who normally present and give amazing displays. So I've clipped the wings today a bit, so I've forced them to actually talk and use real words, so we can talk more interestingly and practically about how we create these experiences and so on for a variety of different levels. If you don't know them already, to my left is Steve Blyth, who's founder and group CEO of EngageWorks, and to his left is Evan Grant, founder of Seeper. I don't know whether you're familiar with them, but I'm sure you may have heard of them. Now then, spicing up the AV experience was a bit of a bolder title, and he's making lots of amazing demos, which we'll have later on probably. But today, we just wanted to focus on just what is an experience. We all witter about this. We've done it in the magazine all the time and actually talk generally about this stuff, but never really defined what it is and how you start about creating it, because it can mean a variety of things to lots of different people. It frightens the AV fraternity. This is why they hire very good agencies to help them do it, of course. Apparently. So, I know, we're going to be throwing in a few controversial comments like that, you see. So what is it? Can I start with you, Steve? What is an experience, and how many different types are we talking about? Basic AV is an experience, isn't it? I mean, it can be anything you want.
It's so broad these days, and the audience is getting more and more. The audience is getting more and more demanding. The clients are getting more demanding, for you, as you know, and to deliver that message is getting more and more involved with not just AV. So years ago, you get away with a big wow experience and thumbs up. Now it's all about two-way communication, brand interaction. All those touch points have to come to life. So it's harder to create those wow moments, and it's got to be driven by the creative core as a start point. Otherwise, if you go the other way around, tech first, you end up with like ISE, pretty much. You know, it's all ice and no cake, as they say in Dubai, isn't it? And,
faux coat, no knickers. Yeah, exactly. Very polite. I must remember that's a much more polite way of saying it. Evan, you're both very different in what you do, aren't you? In a sense, so it's quite interesting. We were going to have Drew Dooley on here, which is going to be our third member of the team. He couldn't make it, unfortunately. He's got rather a lot on. It's much more complicated than it sounds to me, spreading it like that. But it was just to get different views of this from 3 different people to really sort of talk practically about what's involved. Now then, when I speak experience to you, I'm not entirely sure what I'm getting. So you have to explain what you're involved with. We'll go more as examples of what you're producing, but let's talk practically and see what options we have. Where do you both come in? When someone wants an experience, where do you come in, and what process do you use to define what the client wants?
For me, yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on the project, it depends on the client. I'd say the optimum place to come in is right at the start. Because, for example, if you're working with an agency will often come into you with an idea that they formed, they maybe got initial buy-in from the client, and then they've realised they don't know how to make it, and they'll come to you and say, how do we make it? Or, we don't know how to price this, how do we price it? That can sometimes result in amazing projects, but ultimately you're building on other people's ideas. So I find that you get the best results if you come in really, really early, and so people approach you with more of a desire. So the desire is, we want to get traction around this, or we want people to walk away with this particular type of memory, or we want to convey this story, or we want to, give this information, or a brand activation, or whatever it is. And then you can kind of really dig into it and collaborate. And so I guess that's the way we approach it. We always say, bring the creative teams together right at the start, and then kind of co-own the idea, develop it together.
Who's involved in those creative teams? I mean, that's when you talk creative. I mean, to an AV team working with perhaps a chief executive, perhaps, or I mean, where does this thinking come from, and how does it articulate itself in the business?
Yeah, I mean, again, on the client side, it depends on the client massively. In an agency situation, you're typically working with maybe a creative director and a producer. If you're working on attractions, then it's more specific people within particular brands or particular sectors. I mean, from our side, it's normally creative director and a technical director working together, and then pulling in technical or creative expertise around specific problems. So if we're trying to ascertain how far can we push this particular thing, is this possible? Then we bring in obviously the relevant expertise on the team to inform that. But yeah, I mean, normally it starts at that kind of senior level, I guess, initially, before then, in an ideal world, bringing the client in. And a lot of people, especially agencies, get scared to bring the client in early on, and I think that's wrong. I think if you bring the client into the conversation immediately, they will start to own the idea, and then ultimately you won't have to sell it to them because they already feel they're part of it.
Also, I think there's some clients you have to factor in, especially the big corporate brands we work with direct. You've got a lot more stakeholders going on as well. So, for example, we've done a big project. Well, it's a rolling project for the last 4 years with Sky. And you can imagine the sort of bureaucracy and the stakeholder management there. So you've got the thing you're trying to create with them, which is generally creatively driven with technology, etc. But you factor in all those filters around it, so it can get bastardized and really sort of diluted down. So the creative gem in the middle gets a bit watered down sometimes. So the perfect client is one that lets you run with it, as you say, and obviously unlimited budget generally, as it usually helps. But the technology which we're talking about, obviously the AV experience, is sometimes the idea might not be there's no AV in it at all. So we don't want to sort of lead with the technology first, which I think is some people do. I mean, there's a great thing that's just around the corner in Hall 10, which is, I don't know if you've seen it, those spinning windmills, called, and it's every time you walk past it, it is stacks of people just filming it, and you think, what's that all about? I mean, apart from it's quite interesting. It's a wow moment, but it's technology for technology. It's delivering a wow moment, but it's almost like the content's a bit. Yeah,
well, ISE is a great example for that. It really just has me in hysterics every year that you'll see at least 10 or 20 big, large-scale displays with the wrong aspect ratio on them. It's just like, how can you actually build that hardware and technology and then not understand the fact that you need the right ratio content on it? It's insane. But the other thing, just to your original question as well, was that the kind of one scenario we get a lot, which is, I totally agree, technology for technology's sake is wrong. And a good example of that is what I call the plaster solution. So, I mean, we on a daily basis get people calling up for the plaster solution. We've got a project, we're nearly at the end of it, it's launching in 2 or 3 weeks, and we've realised it's not very wow. Can we have some wow, please?
For this much money that's already been signed off.
Exactly, and it's like, can you come and put a plaster on it and make us look good? And I totally understand that, you get to that situation, but I think it's just again testament to the fact that you get the best out of people like us by bringing us in early, and it's less stressful for everyone.
Well, the problem I've got is that we're catering for everybody in the industry, from those who are at the basic component level to a point. They're maintaining quite complex AV installations, but they're also now having to deal with many more creative aspects than they originally were trained to support. I'm not saying they can't do them, but they're lacking a little bit of guidance about where they go next. I mean, everybody's saying, well, you should build an experience to your AV and then think what the company is trying to achieve. Does it want to attract customers, put on a good image, and stuff? So everything you do is an experience and everything else. So you need to think a little bit more creatively about how, but the majority of it is trying to make the things work and work regularly as to when the corporate world wants it to work. But you're seeing this move towards doing slightly more interesting things because people are thinking differently about the environment they're working in, especially the environment. But then, is there a disconnect between the AV population that we're used to and communicate to regularly, and what is a traditionally creative sphere, and I can't see the glue in between, yet they're expected to think creatively about what they're producing. And
it's getting better, I think. There's a lot more people that are bridging those gaps. I mean, a lot of people turn to consultants and say, "Oh, can you help us find the right solution, and it's then you're passing the problem to a consultant that he or she needs to be multi-talented, multi-versed, and to even give the right advice. So, but we get, I'm sure we get consultancy sort of requests all the time, but then a lot of clients, especially agencies, are fearful of the advice you're giving them. Oh, it's going to be centred around what we think we should be doing rather than being neutral. Do you know what I mean? So, funny enough, it always leads into a job that we build around ourselves. So, is that right? Is it wrong? I don't know. It's a bit of trust, I think. As people start to trust key people they're going to start working with, forming relationships with that keep going, rather than one-hit wonder projects. As you know, I'm sure you do loads of repeat work, and we do as well. So I think it's when you get that relationship right, then you can do some really magical stuff because the trust is there, and you haven't got to the client's not worrying about you sort of doing, suggesting the wrong thing or not going broader than you can. So I think there's those things are quite good. They're seeing more and more of that happening where people are trusting and returning.
Well, if we focus on seeing a lot of environments, probably. The magazine more or less is split into two. The component side of it, which is bread and butter of the industry, obviously, and seeing making things work. But also, it's this environmental development, which is gaining traction enormously. I mean, a lot of what we do now is seeing Apple, eBay, Deliveroo yesterday, amazing environment in Bloomberg. We just finished looking at Facebook and trying to finalise that off. And it's normally the new types of companies, social media driven or whatever, that because it's a different age group of employee or different type of person looking at it, they're the fast-moving, more modern companies that are taking a different view to how AV fits into both their working environment, which in itself is part of the creative environment they're in anyway. So you can't see the join. Whereas in other slightly older establishments, which are the bread and butter, the corporate banking and so on, it's a separate exercise. And they're going along to big demos and see if they can pick up ideas, but there's no link. That helps us.
We've seen a lot of it in big corporates. We work with PwC and Accenture, and they turn to us to help design their workspace or parts of their workspaces to be tech-rich, enabled space to actually help them collaborate with their clients, with their staff engagement, that sort of thing. So we're finding it more and more that they're going into that space using. They're not going straight to the normal AV type companies where the pro AVs, etc. Because their remit is how many do you want, where do you want it, sort of thing. They don't go into that part about how does a space work, how do you get the best from the technology and create those modern spaces.
I think as well, going back to your original question, I mean, we're finding the same thing. Lots of people approaching us wanting to design spaces and everything else in the corporate environment, and I think actually there's a role emerging that doesn't exist in those companies because, as you say, Clive, AV people here, it's mainly geeks, right? Do you know what I mean? It's people who are integrators, and like you said, it's about reliability and everything else. And in some companies, people are kind of going, right, there is a hole, so what do we do? And sometimes they'll bring the marketing people in, or sometimes they'll bring the HR people in, or they'll go, oh, well, we've got a creative guy, so let's bring him in and see if he knows what's going on. But the reality in the bigger companies is that there is a new role, and there is a need for a new role, which is, somewhere around visitor, employee experience design, or what, I don't know, whatever, and I think at the moment we're kind of filling that gap, and often we have to put our tentacles into those different departments to extract the information, and then we are the glue. But I think that will change, and we'll be being brought in by these specialist roles.
And you're right, you really put your finger on it when you're coming into the show and basically wrong aspect ratios and everything else. I think we did a bit of review last night, and the thing that hit me was why now we've got to this stage with our technology developed, why don't we seeing more stuff on stands at these sort of shows we haven't seen before, instead of being put behind closed doors that only have access to a few people? Why aren't we seeing something, my God, that the example you showed there, that's what this show's about, surely. We should be seeing more like that.
It's the same every year,
makes
isn't
you
it?
think,
Yeah, I mean, I'm always blown away, and no doubt you're the same, Steve, but I always come away from this very disappointed that I've not seen anything interesting in terms of the user experience. I can get interested about tech because I'm a massive geek, but there's nothing where I go, well, that's a really compelling user experience. And ultimately, I know there's a lot of selling stuff to other geeks, but everyone buys into a story, everyone buys into an experience, and yeah, we regularly go around just talking to brands here, just going, what are you doing? I think you probably need to
Well, I've
sort it
made some
out.
blue in the face trying to get. I'm always on the go trying to get people to think differently about all kinds of stuff, which is, I don't think it's an uphill battle actually. I just think people need a lot more help than we think they do.
Yeah.
We're assuming rather a lot.
What have you
And
seen,
see
Clive, in the last few years? What's your biggest change that you've noticed? Because you're sitting above, watching all this going on, writing and reporting. What's your biggest?
Well,
observation?
I'm from a broadcast and creative background, so I get above myself all the time. I go into my land of ethereal worship and assume everything can be done, quickly. But the biggest change I've seen is in higher education, funnily enough. They're all being and pharmaceuticals. They're all being forced to respond to incredible demands from students who want this, that, and the other. Used to social media, used to things working.
Because they just expect it,
I don't know. Yeah, but there's no communication. They don't know how. These are guys who are trained in the basic AV arts, who over the last 7 years I've seen them, tackle some impossible challenges. With no help, no increase in their skill sets, and they've had to learn on the job, virtually a lot of them, and they're dealing with complex networking, environments that are supposed to be wow and inspirational for students who, I think, want that. Although I come from a generation where lectures were inspirational without the technology, if you know what I mean. Which is always a bit of a bugbear for me, use technology, and they're not engaging the guys who are lecturing properly. Imagine how fantastic the people who are delivering the didactic end of it, should be quite inspirational. Just think what they could do with technology, get them on board and work with you. You're seeing a bit with a flipped classroom, that sort of stuff. But more importantly, where I saw some of the changes was in the pharmaceutical companies, all of whom are running to the end of their licenses and patents on drugs. And all the companies are set up in a very conventional, sectionalised environment. The Apple created this view of mixing people together and you'll get a fusion of ideas. And when I used to work for EPSRC, we funded research individual disciplines. But where people made scientific breakthroughs was in multidisciplinary research, where you had chemists working with physicists, and that's what they're trying to do, the farm, create environments that mix these people together for them to help in the creative process to come up with new drugs.
Yeah.
And, the presentations I've seen so far have been bog standard AV stuff, which I shouldn't be saying this, we're going to have on in a couple of days' time, and probably shoot myself in the foot by saying this. But they've been sound technical AV installations. But I'm thinking, well, where's that spark going to come from in the middle of all this? And that's the difficult thing to replicate, really. And that's where I'm looking more for, I think. And that's where your sort of skills come in.
Yeah,
I think.
I mean, as Evan said, is that, they have these big corporates want to design these new spaces to give their staff what they need and what they want in the millennial age, etc. And there's no one person or no one member of their team that has all the answers. Hence, we start to fill it, because it's got to move away from workplace tables, chairs, coffee machine. That's what they're all striving to do. So it's a bit, I know it's a bit. It's not. It's an AV experience. It's not like an AV show. Like Evan does lots of sort of immersive experiential activation stuff, and that's what we all think of AV experience. But the office is now becoming AV mixed in with IT, and it's all becoming a blur, isn't it? So everyone wants to collaborate remotely, and it's all to do with the
I think it's becoming very much like attraction design. Certainly all the corporate jobs we've got at the moment, we're approaching them in the exact same way that we would approach designing a theme park. Because really the end goals are exactly the same, just in a different context. And I think that's the reality. There's a big challenge for a lot of these businesses now. They're competing for talent, they're having to headhunt aggressively. A lot of people want to work remotely, want to work freelance. And a lot of people talk about, well, how do we get people into the office? And you see this as a real problem. You go into these spaces and there's no one there. And so, this idea of how do you create almost like a town centre or a village, something that people want to go to. And, you're seeing it in co-working spaces are effectively stealing away from the corporate desks. I'm staying in a place called the Student Hotel, not far from here. And it literally mixes students with professionals like ourselves. It's full of people from ISE. They've got a TED Talk area, they've got a techie area, there's a bar, there's a canteen. It feels more like a visitor attraction than a hotel. And you can see people flock there for that reason. And that's even without tech. So you lay a good tech onto that, and make it responsive and immersive to people, it'll, you know, I think it'll.
See, it's all down to people, isn't it? I mean, AV is a very people business anyway. I've always maintained it's not technology, even though that's a handful itself to get right. It's how you use it effectively. So I've never really fixated on any one technology in AV. It used to be audio visual, you're missing out the audio. Yes, we are. Yeah, hopefully now rectifying it. But, you know, is it part of IT? I thought it's irrelevant. You know, what are you creating with all this? That's the key thing. And it can be at the what we would call a mundane level, very functional, making a room work for you, or you can be at a very high creative level, where you can take that AV to the next degree, but it's still AV.
Yeah, the technology, I think, should be, you know, ubiquitous or invisible. It's really about what it enables. And, you know, when we approach projects, we always ask the same question. It's, you know, what is the memory that someone's going to take away from this? And in my mind, if there isn't a memory from the experience, then we've failed somehow in how we've designed it. And I think the issue with the industry is, especially at ISE, is that it's dominated by geeks and dominated by men. And unfortunately, that often creates technology-led solutions, and that's not the future. You know, human history has shown that storytelling is the number one most important thing, and it's the same here as it is in any industry.
I hope you're not saying that men aren't creative.
Some are.
I think the word, you need a rich diversity. That's how I get.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's how I cover.
Diversity
That's how
king.
I cover myself.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, the thing is, as having seen Engage and yourself and seeing actually a US design consultancy, ESI, you know, in New York, and I looked at how they were making up their staff, and a lot of them were architects, and they're working with lots of teams that are getting input in best practice, whatever it is, from museums, theme parks, and everything else. So that they're looking at the best of what those can offer, pooling it, having a lab to create solutions for their markets, and they're managing the integrators. And it struck me when I went to Dubai. I thought, God, this is a newly developing area here between the customer and the integrator, that creative element that can be used effectively. You need to understand the business, what it wants to achieve, and therefore be able to translate that in what the technology needs to do with the integrator if they're up to the task. And they're having to really develop themselves quite quickly at the minute.
I think it's those three pillars, which is content, space, and technology, which we talked about in the preamble before. And in Dubai, going back to Dubai, we went there for the first time with my, well, not wife then, but my wife was born there, so we sort of went there 2002, I think it was, and I was in museums at quite a lot of those stages, and I went to the Dubai Museum, which is in the old fort in the old town. Have you been there? And I went to someone sort of like, you know, you go in there and there's a guy there with a big beard, a bit like us two actually, with a big dish dash on, with a fishing rod and a big boat hanging up, and it was all very, you know, rubbish. And there was a massive AV experience. You turn the corner, there was a big video wall, there was projections, there was the Pepper's Ghost, there was sound, immersive sound, you know, great standing. The history of Dubai, it said, and it was they must have spent a lot of money on it at the time. It was, you know, no budget spared, technology rich. And it started, history of Dubai, 1955 it started, and there was a couple of camels walking through the creek, whatever. And it was like so depressing. The content they had available was rubbish, and how they'd used it was rubbish, but they'd obviously spent loads of money on it, and it was all tech first. So if you get if one of those three pillars wrong, it starts to give it a poor experience, you know, in terms of how to get the most exceptional experience. Get any of those wrong, you know, and it starts to affect the other two.
Definitely.
No matter what market you're in, what you're very good at is making connections, which you mentioned actually, you know, meaningful interactions as you call them, I think. How do you do that? How do you make that connection between what the client wants to achieve and what you think the customer or whoever the recipient of that effect is or may be?
Yeah,
I think it's a fairly nebulous thing. I don't know, but
I think it's down to the planning, as Evan said right at the beginning. It's like you've got to get the planning right. Why are we doing it? What's the purpose? What's the brand ambition? You know, that then sets the creative rolling. Then
isn't there some attention grabber? Or is it a more subtle process?
Sometimes you can have a wow to suck people into immerse them in whatever you're trying to tell them. But sometimes it's just great creative and you know and. Being able to sort of be part of it, you know, everyone wants to share and experience emotions from the experience. Generally, it's not just, you can't just walk past an experience now and just go, that's nice, that's great, and then move on. Well, you can, but it's not a great experience. It's just an experience, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? So you have to try a bit harder these days, definitely. Oh, we all expect more. That's the main thing.
I think as well, you often with companies, like the companies we run, PR and marketing is a big factor. And that does, I think, influence it. And you do end up having these conversations where, it's a cliche, but every client wants something that's unique. Every client wants something where they can get the story world's first, blah blah blah. But that again pushes you down the technology, led approach. But in my mind, the kind of goal is to, for want of a better way of putting it, get people in the zone. So, there's different people name this in different ways. There's a famous author who calls it flow. Sports people, when they're kind of at their optimum, they shut off their conscious mind. Your subconscious takes over. Same with musicians, when they're jamming, they talk about how they get lost for hours. And for me, that state of flow, as I choose to call it, that's the goal. If you can get people to that point where they switch off their conscious mind, they forget about their day-to-day, and they're just completely immersed in the experience, and they pop out the other side going, I'm not sure what happened, but that was awesome. They'll go away with a memory, and I think you've succeeded, and I think you get there by extracting what our team are passionate about and what the client's passionate about, and ultimately what their consumer's passionate about. Because you go into anything without passion, and it ends up being forced and a bit crap, and and so if you can get the whole team excited and everyone buys into it, then you always end up with that result, I think.
Well, the more you understand behavioural stuff, and it's getting very behaviour, isn't it? You mentioned cognitive load, how much information people take on, and how you package that probably to deliver it. There seems to be three steps, two extremes really. One where it's so subtle, you're doing things that the technology or whatever it is that's forcing you to do, but you don't realise it. It's just intuitive as an interface, as we like to think of it. There's that interaction where you are consciously doing something, and then there's just a wow performance at the end of it, which is designed to just impress you and influence you in a big way. And it's just making the balance between those three. I can see AV technology as such a powerful tool in all those three scenarios. I just, I can see it different ends of the extreme, from corporate to major shows.
Yeah.
And it's just breaking these down and say, well, you want to do this, you need to think about this, this, and this, and this is how you communicate to a board you want to do it. I just don't know where that starts, actually. Because I don't think companies are sophisticated enough unless you have really good advisors on them that know how to achieve that, and therefore, and neither could do consultants, I don't think. They're not creatively switched on. They're major technicians, really.
But that's why, we do what we do, I guess. I think it's going to grow rapidly in the next few years, mainly because of this move to responsive environments, and people are starting to bring it into their homes with obviously home automation and stuff like that, but in the workplace too, creating very simple technologies ultimately that are well integrated, that know your preferences, know your choices. I talk about it as sympathetic opposites. It's if I'm in a building and it's cold outside, I want it to be warm inside, right? If it's dark outside, I want it to be light inside. But at the same time, if I walk into a meeting room and I'm deeply offended by the colour red, bad example, but the room itself could know that and adapt to that. And if you're one person in a room designed for 200 people, why not adapt the lighting and the atmosphere and even the architecture of the room to feel more intimate? Or vice versa, if the room's full, adapt it the other way. And I think everything is going to become responsive to us and our preferences, and we're going to be walking around with these integrated profiles, that are a combination of social media, a combination of our work and what we do and everything else. And I think that's quite exciting, and I think all the AV tech is already there. Now what it needs is the layer of the storytellers and the integrators and people like ourselves to do interesting things with that, and do things that aren't creepy and aren't weird and aren't Hal gone crazy. Do things that feel beautiful and gentle and giving, if that makes sense.
Well, talking about Anders yesterday at eBay, they've more or less done that on a mechanical level, and you can walk into a room, it responds to you, and you can get up and working within about, within 30 seconds. I think they have a target that they have all these rooms. They've done about 300 installations of these rooms right across the world, really. I mean, in charge of global deployment. The moment you go above that and talk about the creative, you can see the eyes start to glaze over, really, and think, well, that's not what I'm doing. There's that functional difference between a professional AV person. They just need help thinking in a different way. And I don't
But
think
if you show
it's not the
them,
right brain, is it? The
yeah.
creative and the functional, they are fairly incompatible sometimes,
Yeah.
aren't they?
Depending on the person, I guess. But I think if you show them, I mean, a good example, we're doing some projects around wayfinding. So if you work in a massive building, the reality is that people get lost. They can't find the information they want, or they're trying to get to a meeting room, they can't get there. Very simple solutions that as you're walking around the building, things could be projected on the floor in front of you. It's like, hey, Evan, you need to turn left here. Oh, you need to go right there, or it's around 12 o'clock. That's normally when you go for lunch. There's a new special dish on this floor. Guide you there. It's that kind of stuff that I think if you demonstrate that to the AV people, it's narrative again. They'll get very excited, and it's just showing the potential, isn't it?
This is where IoT will come in, and infrastructure where that we got that debate. There's no such thing as a smart building. There may be a bit of intelligence at some point, but no one's really built one yet that's intuitive enough to respond to people inside it. It's just a structure that's intelligent, or if you want to call it that way. But I think it's just smart. I think intelligence is a different word. But this sort of thing could well be the next step. This is where AI could come in.
Exactly, yeah.
And start recording, remembering what your preferences were, and behaviourally adapt to what you want to do.
Yeah,
I think it's a different technology. I don't know how far are we are with that.
I think it's already there. Again, I mean, we've developed some of that kind of technology working with kids with special needs. And that's actually quite mature, because ultimately if you're working with someone with autism, everyone's got very specific sensory profiles that you have to target, otherwise you can't help them learn. Really all the normal people are just as special in different ways. And so, I mean, we're working a lot on AI at the moment, and how we integrate that into the attraction space and into these kind of environments. And I think you're going to see a massive splurge of that very, very rapidly.
We've seen a couple of examples of how in Europe they can miss out part of the drug interaction series by actually making them feel better about themselves by looking at AV-induced visual scenarios where they look at something that's nice to watch and enjoy it, and it's plumbed into to sit there. And instead of having the first level of drug before they go into their treatment, they don't need to give them drugs because they're just in a nice visual state by being in an environment that makes them feel better about themselves. I'd love to see that explored further, but I haven't seen the UK, but it's certainly happening in Europe, in where it was now, in Sweden or whatever it was, where we have a slightly better funded health service to do it, I suppose. But no, it's just the power of this. It's just remarkable if it's used properly.
It sounds like that probably have quite a big recreational market.
They probably had a good start, haven't they? Yeah, I know.
It's very hot in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Oh, got me off track now. How are we doing, everybody? Anything you want to ask? Have we tempted those brain cells into action? Oh, I could throw you my catch box. I'll ask you to do this, Steve, because you're better at it, probably. We do enjoy throwing this thing, You got quite aggressive yesterday.
Am I just going to speak here?
Yeah, I don't know how you switch it on. Do you tap it?
Okay. Oh, there we are. That's weird.
There's always a bit of feedback, don't worry.
When you were talking in the beginning about collaborating, so coming from an agency and running an agency, in our opinion, we obviously think we're brilliant and creative, but when you're talking about the stage in which you kick off, so that kind of early integration of the team, how does that work in reality? Is that a kind of pitch scenario, or because obviously there's some things around ownership and co-owning an idea, and how does that work in practice? Because we've been nervous and burnt at times actually in engaging people quite early on, and then either it's gone off and been developed elsewhere, or that hasn't quite worked out, and then there's been a huge fee on it, and then we haven't ever been able to get it off the ground. I'm just really interested in how that works.
Sure. Shall I take that?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tricky one with agencies, because we get, for want of a better word, bombarded by agencies. And over the years, we've gone from trying to accommodate everything to now having this quite brutal filter, because we literally got to the point where it's just like all of our time's being spent helping other people pitch, which isn't sustainable. And I mean, what we basically say now is, if you're willing to take us into a meeting with your client, then we're willing to work with you on a pitch if it's an interesting project. If people aren't up for that, then you typically know they're time wasters. So I know that sounds like a slightly aggressive answer, but you have to be like that. So and I think a lot of companies who do similar things to us have those kind of filters now. So I think it's very much about respecting people's time and stuff like that, because one of the first questions we also ask is, are you retained or are you pitching? Yeah. Now, if someone's retained and they want to do a load of meetings with us and stuff like that, it's like, well, let's work on a seed budget and let's work together to develop it, and you're getting paid for your time, so we should get paid for our time, right? But when it comes to pure pitch, we're now just selective in terms of, if we think it's a really cool pitch, if we really love the idea and we see that we could add value to it and help you guys evolve it, then we take that risk, and we say, well, this is worth speculating on, this is worth doing. But so I don't know if that addresses your question a bit, but then beyond that, in terms of ownership of the ideas and stuff, we have the same issue the other way around. When you start out, you're fearful of telling your ideas because agencies run with them. And to be honest, I've kind of got to the point now where I'm sort of over that. I think there's collective consciousness, there's ideas, they're all out there somewhere. It's one of those, isn't it? And it's a respect thing. If you give an idea to an agency and then you see it pop up a few years later, then you're going to badmouth that agency to everybody else, and vice versa. Do you know what I mean?
We get it at times, when they move on. That's very similar to something we've presented before as well. I think that's the important thing. Sorry, we've started to develop partnerships now with people like yourselves, because that trust and relationship cancels a lot of that out, and that I suppose willingness to put those people in front of your clients is there then, because you've got a bit of an agreement and a contract.
Exactly that, and that is 100% the preferred way to work. For me, it's just transparency. It's like cards on the table, and that's the best way. And then it can be great. I don't know how you find it.
Well, I think it's the same really. I think we've got to the point where we started to put lots of filters pre-qualification, because we were getting bombed, because we've got this thing called the Flux Lounge, which is basically full of like our ideas, our sort of things we've developed, and other partners that we bring in to sort of showcase their work, like little few startups and a few sort of big grown-up stuff. So we get a lot of agencies, because we have a lot of networking press things in there as well, but a lot of agencies turn up and they're just like, well, that's nice, how much is that? And that's almost like, okay, that's a free bit, they come and see the space, and then if it turns into something, if we're behind it and we think it's great, and the pre-qualification is not like a 1 in 30 chance of winning something, we sort of pre-qualify it out. But we're trying to sort of offer discovery phases with clients now, where we put some seed money, 10 grand or so, doing what it is, like workshop some ideas, and as long as there's an output for that, then obviously then it starts to end of that phase can end, or it can carry on to something else. So, but generally, if we can't get to the client meetings with the people that are trying to bring us in, that it's we had it the other day. While we've been here, an agency who we've been named as sort of came down and started saying, we want all these ideas. We said, well, what's the brief? What's the tried to dig in a bit. Oh, we don't know. So basically, you should have gone to ISE to have a look. That's nice. Stick it in a PowerPoint and then send it off. It's sort of what they were trying to do. But there's so much more than what they're trying to do. What the why rather than the how. But we've got less and less involved with agencies, because I think it's not as easy as it used to be about sort of like getting people like us on board and for pitches. But trying to have a retained relationship with you mentioned a minute ago about growing sort of partnerships. As long as it's the right partner and it's right for lots of things rather than just one thing. Like you'd never get into partnership with a sound engineer, I suppose, because it's maybe. But if you've got like people who do experiential and deeper, broader things, and then it's worth it, isn't it? Like innovation, that sort of thing.
Definitely.
So how do you normally get around the problem then?
So by hiring specialists, or like we're working with Drew at the moment, and I'm sure we're working with your company as a result on certain things.
Great.
Yeah. So I've heard of Engaged. Quite
I knew that Drew was working with you. Yeah.
So it's not just it's in definitely the tech space in terms of for us. Things like this, experiential, big kind of wow pieces, because as an agency you can't employ that specialism in-house, certainly we can't, and you need to rely on the specialists in their relative kind of areas.
It changes so much, like we just talked about Internet of Things and AI, those experts suddenly don't exist in the norm. We're going to get experiential spatial design, and we're going to do some some great sort of projection, and then suddenly they have to be experts in AI. So suddenly you need loads of people running around.
Yes.
So at least with people like us, and there's a few other people that obviously that are doing great stuff, that have got a good spread.
Yeah.
You can dip in and drop that bit and use that bit. So I think it's the future of, I think for agencies anyway, to sort of grow those sort of selected relationships, because you can't have like 50 retained partners who just go out of business.
We've got like 2 currently, and that's taken me about a year, and that's in everything from kind of TV production to, you know, building hardcore websites and things like that. So I think we're trying to make sure that we can realise our creative without the sticky plaster kind of stress. So yeah, I think that's the way we've been doing it.
Cool.
Sorry, I'm hogging.
That's fine. That's what we're here for. You know. I was going to actually bring up the idea of how the environment can support. I mean, certainly we're thinking environment too so much, but acoustics, smell in some cases, all those sort of non-technical aspects of the environment, how important they are, and what part they play in any creative role that you're involved with in a corporate environment.
In a corporate environment?
Yeah, I think so. Well, you know, what experience you had?
It's similar. I think, you know, it's from a sort of experiential sort of, you know, installation which people just visit and leave. I think it needs to be accentuated and you know, raised to heighten that experience. But I think in the office, it's definitely big considerations. It's maybe, you know, it's not about loads of new smells, and it's just getting the things to make the working environment better and more responsive. It's definitely important to control it, but not necessarily to go mad with the sensations, because it's not what you want in a working environment, maybe generally.
No, but you know, so many of these big environments are big spaces, but there are multiple uses in those spaces. Yeah. And perhaps not smell, you know, but certainly acoustics is becoming bigger, and we're trying to really educate people on the right, you know, Barco, Bloomberg, was, you know, very subtle use of materials and the fabric with the AV that I think, well, you know, what understand it now. It's working closely with the architect and the visionary.
I think acoustics is one that people get wrong a lot, because there's been a massive trend towards open plan workspaces, and personally I think they're completely disastrous, because, you know, all the research shows that if your concentration gets broken when you're in deep concentration, it takes you about half an hour to get back there. When you're in an open plan workspace, your concentration is getting broken continually. I mean, like all the time. And so I think it's great to have communal meeting places and crossover places and stuff like that. But you go into most work environments and the acoustics are horrendous. There's, you know, there's an actual cacophony of just noise and, you know, people working on the phone, different things. And it's really, really bad. But I mean, going back to your original question as well, in terms of smell, which is weirdly the most effective sense in terms of creating memories and connections to different parts of the brain. But the one
coffee thing.
Yeah, but it's the one that gets used and designed the least, and I'd argue that it's probably the one that's least understood. And I agree, in the workspace, you know, the typical approach would probably be the supermarket approach. You know, it's you pump fresh coffee or bread through the door because it makes everyone perk up in the morning or whatever. But you're also seeing these extremes in design. So, you know, Google are trying to you know, out mode or whatever, you know, Facebook by going, well, we're going to build a jungle in the middle of ours. So, you know, in that scenario, which I personally think is quite fun. Do you know what I mean? It's obviously it's a bit kind of, I don't know, gimmicky, but it's like, I could imagine going into the jungle, and if I'm the kind of person who likes the jungle, why not make it smell like the jungle? Why not change the atmosphere in there? You know, the temperature, everything about it. And then, you know, on the other side, there might be a completely different environment. You know, if you're a kind of company that's got that money to spend, why not? You know, it's cheaper than sending all your staff to the beach for the day, right? Just put them in the room with the sand, with the waves and the...
Well, working in Croydon, I think that'd be a huge help. Yeah, I just think everything's up for grabs, and what's probably lagging are skills and the creative ability to make the best use of them.
Integrate
I think anything
well,
goes. Yeah, exactly. That's the key
if
thing.
If it's integrated really, really well, it works. If it's all like quite bitty, the journey's a bit broken.
It's got to be believable, hasn't it, basically?
When it's done well, it works really well, yeah.
Okay, I think we're running up to time. That unbelievably is nearly an hour. Would you believe it? Any other questions before we go? Sounds so final, doesn't it? I know. Leave you longing for more, you see. That's why we do it.
Can I ask you one question? It's quite difficult to define what you guys do, because I take it that you combine kind of creative nous with the technical skills to implement it. Would you guys describe yourselves in that way?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the handful of people I know who run companies like we do, I don't really know Steve very well. We met like an hour ago, but other people who, and to be honest, they're typically people who are good mates who we've gone off and set up similar businesses. I would say are all equally geeky and creative.
Okay.
You know, when I was a kid, when my mum and dad went out for dinner, I took the TV apart.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to figure out how it worked. But then, you know, in the same breath, I was playing around painting and designing and building things. And so I feel lucky that I've got a pretty much 50-50 creative tech. I can get just as excited about the two. I think for me, anyway,
my background's engineering actually. So started off working for a company that designed power stations, which I soon realised was not for me, and went off into TV, doing model making, and I did stuff with London's Burning, physical blowing things up and that sort of thing. Okay. So I'm sort of like a very technical background, as in inquisitive, not necessarily technical, but then you soon realise you have to employ loads of people around you that are better than you in lots of disciplines, because otherwise it doesn't fly. So in our sort of environment, we've got product designers, we've got sort of technical engineers, we've got developers, content people, strategy, spatial. You know, we've even got some ex-guys from EY that roll into certain projects because it's that sort of grey world rather than colourful world we all try to be in. Yeah. But no, I think it's that sort of mix, that demographic mix that makes it work. I think if it was all just design or all just tech, then it doesn't get that breadth.
It's what you were saying earlier, Clive, the cross-disciplinary thing. You know, like we've literally got a scenario where there's an industrial designer, you know, sat next to someone who's doing motion graphics or animation or composing music, or do you know what I mean, an architect or an electrical engineer, and they're all mashed up together. And there's not that many environments where you would have those people working so directly, and that's the exciting bit, I think. You know, and the approach we always take is, you know, if it doesn't exist, then make it. If it does exist, then try and repurpose it. You know, and that's the exciting bit. There's no bounds to the thinking, because it's just like, well, let's just figure out how to do it. You know.
Do you know, I think these agencies, I mean, basically in a nutshell, they create magic. But we're going from our conventional education of the last 30, 40 years into a new era where, you know, the boundaries that we've had, little silos of our own education, where we were specialists in a small number of subjects, and nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But the world now around us, and business in general, is demanding much more flexibility, not just education, but management skills and so on, to create things that are... Look at the key companies now around the world. They're not companies that were around 30, 40 years ago. They've survived, and they're probably getting bigger by their flexibility, their new approach to things. And we're going to have to breed a new generation of professionals, actually, who capitalise on that. And that's the way the world's going to go, potentially.
It's reflected in what I do and how my agency works, where it used to be kind of you were set up, you're a producer or whatever. I'm a developer and designer and stuff, but you'd be given a team, creative team, you know, art director and copywriter. They would feed into you, and then you would do your thing. Essentially, you were the end process, and I think what you guys were talking about earlier is you can't be the end process anymore. You have to be right at the beginning, and that's
Definitely,
what I've always thought about. And also kind of making teams of what is required. So it might be that you don't need an art director if it's a copy-led thing, or you don't need a copywriter if it's just a visual project. And then you just pull in the resources that you require. And I take it that's how you guys work.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, you have a bedrock obviously in-house, but then you swell as you need to, you know.
I think agencies are going for that transition quite rapidly. We work with quite a big agency in the WPP group, and they're suddenly literally overnight, since January started, they're trying to reinvent themselves. They're trying to make themselves, their words more digital, even though none of us know what the word digital means these days. But
it should be banned, I think.
So he's like, yeah, exactly. He's like, you know, be more digital and more innovative. He's like, but that's like a whole mindset they've got to change. Like they like dinosaurs. They've got 27 offices. The one in London's got 50, 60 people. Yeah. And they're trying to become more technical, more innovative overnight. And he's like, well, you can't just do that. But the same people that they've got before in December are now got different titles. I mean, I'm now head of innovation, and like the blokes, you know, I'm pretty old, but he's older than me, and so it feels like it should be someone who's like 18 with little beanie hat on and spotty face, because that's what they need to employ. They just moved everyone around and said, right, we're going to now become innovative overnight, and I don't know how long it's going to go. And it's going to go.
Good luck with that.
Client side as well. I mean, we met a guy who's
Can you put your can't hear you very well.
client side as well. We met a guy whose job title is analytics and innovation. I think they just tagged the innovation on the end. It was really interesting to see what a client wants to do, because they want to take all of this data they've been collecting through whatever, and then kind of use that in a more innovative way.
It's easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah, no,
use
exactly.
it,
That's the thing.
data, then how to use it.
He came in, he said, what are we going to do? He had a HoloLens on and stuff like that. What are we going to do with this?
Well, he came into the office with HoloLens on. Straight to the wall.
No, that's it. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much. It was stimulating. Thanks so much, and thanks to the.
Thank you.
We're lucky to have them on here. Actually, they're very busy people. So, thanks to Steve and
Thanks for having
David
us.
Arndt. Yeah,
All right,
good.
thanks.
Thanks.
Shame we couldn't get Drew, but anyway, more than compensated actually.